He dropped the gray deposit bag at my feet the way some men drop a tip. Like it cost him nothing and meant everything. Run it to Keystone. Then cover the lunch rush. Family doesn't keep score. Nora, 7 years. I'd kept that man's books, and not one day had I ever been on his payroll. Here is what he didn't know that morning. My name was already on a $48,000 bank guarantee, locked in a drawer, 2 miles up the road. And I had never signed a single line of it. I stepped over the bag, walked out the kitchen door, and left with a bus ticket and $31. Today, I read financial statements for a living. I am a forensic accountant and a certified fraud examiner. Catching people who forge names and lie with numbers is the entire job. Last winter, the biggest lie my family ever built landed in my work queue, and I made every stolen year reconcile. To the dollar, by the book, without breaking one rule. My name is Nora Petralia. I am 34 years old. If you've ever been the one the whole family counted on and never once counted, stay with me. The most honest thing in that diner was about to become the thing that set me free. Before I go on, if your chest is already tight, if you already know exactly the kind of morning I am describing, do me one favor, like this video, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is right now. I read them, all of them. It helps these stories reach the next person who needs to walk out their own door. Let me tell you about my family. Because the lie only works if you understand the shape of it. We were not poor. We were not stupid. From the street, we looked like a postcard. My father, Sal Petralia, owned Petralia's Diner on Mill Street in Marwick, Pennsylvania. Coal country gone quiet. The kind of town where everyone's grandfather worked underground and everyone's grandkids leave. The diner had 11 booths, a counter with 9 stools, a catering side that did funerals and first communions, and a reputation people drove 40 minutes for. My mother, Gail, worked the register and the gossip. My younger brother, Marco, was the golden one. Marco was 3 years younger than me. You would never have guessed it from how they treated us. Marco had ideas. I had duties. That was the whole arrangement. And nobody ever wrote it down, because nobody needed to. I started behind that counter at 18. By 19, I wasn't just waiting tables. I was doing the books. That part happened by accident, and it changed my life twice. Once for the worse, and years later, once for the better. Stay with me on this, because the books are the whole story. There was a woman who came in every morning at 6 and sat in booth 6. Dolores. Retired bookkeeper, sharp as a tack. Black coffee. 2 eggs over hard. No toast. She watched me one morning, fighting with my father's shoebox of receipts at the end of the counter. And she said, "You are doing that the hard way. Bring it here." For 2 years, she taught me a little every morning between her eggs and her crossword. Double entry. Reconciliation. How to read a profit and loss statement. Like a paragraph. How to find the lie inside a column of numbers that all add up. Dolores told me something once that I never forgot. She tapped the green ledger I'd started keeping for the diner, the real one, the honest one. And she said, "A ledger doesn't lie for anybody, Nora. Not for family. Not for the man who signs your checks. Not for you. Learn to read it. And you'll never need permission to know your own worth." I was 20 years old. I wrote that down on the inside cover of the green ledger. I had no idea I'd spend the next decade proving she was right. So that is who I became inside that diner. I opened at 6. I answered the phone, took the catering orders, scheduled the 2 cooks and the 3 servers, ran payroll for everybody except myself, did the deposits, reconciled the accounts, chased the vendors, and closed the second set of books every night in booth 6 after the lights went down. The green ledger. My handwriting on every page. My father never gave me a title. He never put me on payroll. When I asked about getting paid, and I asked more than once, he'd smile that warm, reasonable smile and say the same thing every time. Family doesn't keep score. Nora, this is how you contribute. Marco's got the big picture to think about. The big picture. Let me tell you about Marco's big picture. Marco had a new big picture every 18 months. And my parents funded every single one. There was the food truck that ran for one summer and lost. I am not guessing. I balanced it. $11,000. There was the Petralia sauce he was going to bottle and sell at the regional grocery chain. He got as far as a logo and $1,000 of label printing. There was the sports bar concept, the franchise, dream, the vending machine route. None of it survived contact with the spreadsheet. And I know because I was the spreadsheet. And here is the part that mattered later. The part I want you to hold on to. On every loan document, every vendor account, every line my father opened to feed those dreams. The name that went on the paperwork as operations manager was Marco's. The work was mine. The title was his. It is just a formality. My father would say, sliding a paper across the counter. Just sign. Where it is tabbed, just a formality. Just a formality. Remember that phrase. It comes back. And when it does, it isn't small at all. There is one afternoon I want you to see. Because it is small. And small is where the whole pattern lived. It was a Thursday in the fall. I was 23. A loan officer from Keystone came to the diner to look the place over before approving the first equipment account. I was at the back table with the books open because, of course, I was. My father walked the man through the dining room, proud as a peacock, and when they got to the back, he put his hand on Marco's shoulder. Marco, who'd wandered in 20 minutes earlier, and he said, "And this is my son, Marco. He runs this place. Top to bottom. Couldn't do it without him." I was 8 feet away, in my apron, with the actual ledger under my actual hand. The banker nodded at Marco and shook his hand and never once looked at me. Because in that room, I was furniture, and Marco was the future. My father didn't even glance my way. It wasn't cruelty. Exactly. It was just true. To him, Marco ran the place because Marco was the one worth saying it about. I went back to the numbers, and I didn't say a word. I never said a word. And 9 years later, when my brother put sole operator, top to bottom, on a federal loan application, I realized that sentence hadn't started with him. He'd just been repeating a story our father had been telling bankers since I was 23. The lie had a paper trail. It just took me a decade to be the one holding the pen. Now I'll tell you about the worst one. The one that left a mark I carried for 10 years without knowing it was there. It was the winter. I was 24. Keystone Savings up in Scranton had approved a $48,000 line of credit for the diner. A new walk-in, cooler, a roof. The catering van. My father came home pleased. He spread the closing packet on the kitchen table and went down it page by page, tab by tab, having Marco sign as the principal. And then, near the back, there was a personal guarantee. Somebody with steady habits and clean credit had to personally back the line. That somebody, on the page, was me, and I want to be very precise about what I am telling you. Because I was very precise when I finally proved it. I did not sign that guarantee. I was not at that table for that page. I learned later it was signed on an afternoon. I was 40 miles away at a vendor warehouse, picking up a freezer compressor with a time-stamped receipt to prove where I stood. But on the night they spread the packet on the table, I didn't know any of that yet. I saw my name on the line, and I assumed I'd signed it somewhere in the blur. The way you assume about the 100th paper somebody calls a formality. I let it go. We always let it go. That assumption cost me 6 years of my financial life. The ink told the truth, long before I did. If you've ever signed a stack of papers somebody you trusted called a formality, you already feel the cold spot in your stomach. Hold on to that. We're going to come back and warm it up. By the time I was 26, I'd been keeping that family afloat for 7 years, and I did the math one night in booth 6, because that is what I do. I added it up. 55 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, for 7 years. That is 20,020 hours. Pennsylvania minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. Still is. 20,020 hours at $7.25 is $145,145. That is what they would have owed me at the floor, the absolute legal minimum, for the cheapest possible version of the work I actually did. I wasn't doing minimum wage work. I was doing a controller's job. But I wrote the number down anyway, in the green ledger, on a back page in pencil. $145,145. And under it, I wrote the date. It wasn't really about the money. It was about the fact that they had taken my 20s and turned them into a waiting room for everyone else's life. Marco's dreams. My mother's comfort. My father's name on the door. And me in booth 6 after midnight, balancing a business that would have told the truth about who ran it, if anyone had ever bothered to read the book. Then, the spring I was 26. I found a door. I'd been taking accounting classes at night, online. At the community college, up the highway. I paid for them in cash. I skimmed from my own birthday money, and tips I hid in a coffee can. I built a resume that tried very hard to make 7 years of unpaid family labor sound like a career, and I applied. I applied to 40 firms. Over 3 months, one called back. Brenner and Associates, a small certified public accounting firm in Scranton, 45 minutes away. Junior. Accounting clerk, 40. $1,000 a year. Benefits. A door with my own name on the other side of it. The phone screen went well. The first interview went better. Then they invited me back for a final round on a Tuesday in April, 2 p.m., with the 2 partners. I printed that invitation. I read it so many times, the paper went soft at the folds. I hid it inside the green ledger, between 2 pages of November catering numbers. Because the green ledger was the one thing in that house nobody but me ever opened. It was my exit visa. 45 minutes away. Far enough to breathe. I made a mistake. I left the printout in my coat pocket one night instead of the ledger. And my mother found it doing what she called the laundry, and I called surveillance. She didn't say anything. That is how I knew. It was bad. The interview was a Tuesday. April 12th, to make a 2 p.m. in Scranton. I needed to leave Marwick by 12:30. I came down to the diner that morning at 10:40 in black slacks and a white blouse and a borrowed blazer. Navy. A half size too big. I told them I had a dentist appointment in Wilkes-Barre. I had my folder. I had a bus schedule. I had $31 and a one-way ticket. I'd bought the night before, so I couldn't talk myself out of it. My mother was standing in front of the cash register with her arms crossed and her lips pressed into the thin line. That meant the decision had already been made somewhere. I wasn't invited. Where do you think you are going? She said. That is when my father came out of the kitchen with the gray deposit bag in his hand, and Marco came in behind him, car keys spinning on his finger, already wearing the half grin of a man taking a day off. He hadn't earned. I've got the vendor thing in Allentown. Marco said, could run all day. You've got the floor. My father set his coffee on the counter. He wasn't angry. He was amused, which was always worse, and he dropped the gray deposit bag at my feet. It landed heavy enough to shift the salt shakers on the nearest table. Run that to Keystone, he said, then cover the lunch rush. And the Delgado anniversary picks up at 4. Family doesn't keep score. Nora, that is what you've got. I looked at the clock over the pie case. 10:47. I had a bus to catch at 12:15. I can't today, I said. My voice came out level, which surprised me. I have something important, more important than family. My mother said. She picked the printout off the register where she'd been holding it the whole time and set it face up on the counter. So I'd know she knew. The Brenner and Associates letterhead. My interview. 2 p.m. We know about your little appointment. After everything this family has done for you, who do you think you are? And my father, calm, reasonable. The man everyone in Marwick trusted. Said the thing he'd been saying my whole life. Just once more for the road. Girls who come from places like this don't get to chase things. Nora, they get to be depended on. That is the job. That is the whole job. I looked at the deposit bag, at my feet. I looked at my mother in front of the door, holding the proof of my one chance like it was evidence against me. I looked at Marco already turning, already gone, already certain I'd stay, because I always stayed. I looked at the clock, 10:49. And I did something I had never done in 26 years. I stepped over the gray deposit bag. I walked past my mother. I went back through the kitchen, past the line, past booth 6, and I pushed open the steel kitchen door that led out onto the alley behind Mill Street. My mother's voice came after me. High and sharp. Nora Catherine. If you walk out that door, I walked out that door. The April air was raw, 40-some degrees and gray. The kind of morning that can't decide whether to rain. I walked up the alley to Mill Street and turned toward the bus stop. A mile and a half in flat shoes that were not built for it. My phone vibrated against my leg 4 times. Then 5. Then 6. I didn't look. I passed the front of the diner on the corner. The lights were on. My father's name was on the sign. The place I'd given 7 years and 20,000 hours. And not $1. I kept walking. I made the bus with 6 minutes. To spare, I bought the day's coffee. I couldn't really afford, and I sat in the back and watched Marwick slide away behind the trees. I thought, very clearly, I am free. I did not yet know what they would do, to make sure I wasn't. If you've ever held a piece of paper that was supposed to be your way out, and watched someone you loved, hold it like a weapon. Comment the word SCORE below. If your family ever told you they don't keep score while you did all the counting, I want to know you are out there. You are not the only one, and I promise you, this gets better. I made it to Brenner and Associates at 1:55. Sweating through the borrowed blazer, the two partners were kind. Older man named Walt Brenner, younger woman named Priya Anand. They asked about reconciliation, about handling a difficult client, about discretion. I answered every question. And I answered them well, because I had been doing the actual work for 7 years, even if no one had ever paid me for it. At the end, Walt Brenner closed his folder and smiled and said, "Nora, I'll be honest with you. We're impressed. We'll get a formal offer out to you this week. I think you are going to be a good fit here." I floated to the bus. The ride home felt different, lighter, like the air had thinned out. I'd done it. I'd walked out, and I'd done it on my own. I went back to the diner that night, only to get my things. The family was there, not speaking. I went up to my room, which had become storage for Marco's old gym equipment, and I packed a duffel. Clothes for a week, my laptop, my certificates. The coffee can with $240 in it, and the green ledger. I almost left the ledger. I am so glad I didn't. And you'll see why. My mother appeared in the doorway. "You embarrassed this family today." I zipped the bag. "I am leaving. You'll be back. You've got nowhere to go." I looked at her. Really looked. "No." I said, "I won't." I gave them one address before I left. The diner, because it was the only mailing address I had. I figured the offer letter would come there, and I'd grab it. That was the last mistake I made in that house. And it was the one that mattered, because the offer letter did come there. I just never saw it. I slept on Dolores's couch, the woman from booth 6, for 19 nights while I figured out where to go. She didn't ask questions. She made me eggs over hard and let me cry exactly once, in her bathroom. And then she handed me the classifieds and said, "All right, up." A ledger never balanced itself. The offer letter from Brenner and Associates arrived at the diner 4 days after my interview. Addressed to me. I know the exact date now, because 8 years later I held the proof in my own 2 hands. April 16th. My mother opened it. And here is what my family did next. And I want you to remember they did it calmly, on purpose, with paperwork. Because that is how the worst people do the worst things. She typed a letter on the diner's old letterhead, a polite, professional letter declining the position at Brenner and Associates, citing a family obligation and a change of plans, thanking them for their time, and she signed it with my name, in a cursive that looked enough like mine to pass. She mailed it back to Walt Brenner, and then, 4 days after that, when the firm's office manager called the diner's landline to confirm, I'd really declined. Because Priya Anand had liked me, and something felt off. My mother answered the phone and confirmed it, said, "I'd had a family emergency," said, "I'd changed my mind," said I was so sorry. Brenner and Associates closed my file. Candidate declined. They moved on. They had no reason not to. And me. I never got the offer, so I assumed the obvious thing. I assumed I hadn't gotten the job. I assumed Walt Brenner had been polite and hadn't meant it. I was 26, ashamed. No contact, scraping rent in a city where I knew one person, and I did not have it in me to call a firm that had, as far as I knew, passed on me. So I never called, and the lie sat in a filing cabinet in Scranton. For 8 years. Waiting. For 8 years. I thought I'd simply failed. I thought I wasn't good enough. The truth was, I'd been good enough the whole time, and someone I trusted had forged me out of my own life with a typewriter and a phone call. That detail matters later. Stay with me. I am going to move fast through the next stretch. Because you already know I survived. What you don't know yet is what I turned into. So let me give you the years the way they actually felt. Fast, scrappy, and pointed straight at one thing. I moved to Pittsburgh in May with a duffel bag and the green ledger. I got a job keeping the books for a heating oil distributor. For $16 an hour and a desk by the loading dock. I rented a studio over a laundromat for $510 a month. No air conditioning. A window that looked at a brick wall. I enrolled at the State Branch campus at night, and I finished the accounting degree I'd been chipping at. One class at a time, paying as I went so I'd owe no one anything ever again. I studied at a folding table after 10-hour days. I took the certified public accountant exam in pieces over 2 years and passed every section, and the first time I saw my own name on a license. Nora Petralia, certified public accountant. I sat on my floor and held it and didn't call a single soul, because there was no one in that family I wanted to tell, and that was the loneliest, freest feeling I have ever had. For a long time, money frightened me. Even my own. I kept that $240 coffee can on the shelf. For 3 years after I didn't need it. Because a part of me still believed the floor could open up. Then one winter I finally counted what I'd saved on my own. Real savings. In a real account. With my real name on it. And I poured the coffee can into the deposit and walked it to the bank myself. I ran my own deposit. For once, it was the first deposit bag I ever carried. That was mine. I think about that morning more than I think about the one I walked out of. I moved from the oil company to a regional accounting firm. Then I found the thing I was actually built for. A senior partner caught me reconstructing a vendor's doctored statements just for practice, the way other people do crossword puzzles. And he said, "You don't just keep books, you catch people." Have you ever thought about fraud examination? I hadn't. Then, I couldn't think about anything else. I earned the certified fraud examiner credential. I learned how forgers move, how embezzlers hide, how a liar's numbers always leave a seam if you are patient enough to find it. Forensic accounting settled into me, like the last number in a column that finally balances. And 4 years ago, Allegheny Commercial Bank in Pittsburgh hired me into their loan review and financial crimes unit. We are the regional lender for small business administration loans across the whole western half of the state. If a small business loan in this part of Pennsylvania looks wrong, it eventually crosses a desk in my unit, mine, or one of 3 others. By last winter, I was a senior forensic accountant on that team. I had an office with a window that looked at the river. Instead of a brick wall, I had a license with my name on it. A savings account I'd built $1 honest at a time. And a green ledger from a diner 300 miles away sitting on my shelf, like a thing I'd survived. I thought that was the whole circle. I'd left a back kitchen door with $31. And I'd become the person who reads the lie inside the numbers for a living. Full circle. I was wrong. The circle wasn't closed yet. The last piece was about to mail itself. Straight to me. There is one more thing from those Pittsburgh years you have to know, because it is the wound that the ending finally heals. My second year in the city, I applied for a better apartment, and I got denied. Credit. I'd never missed a payment in my life, so I pulled my report, and there it was. Sitting in the middle of it like a tumor, a charged off line of credit. Keystone Savings. $48,000 limit. Drawn to the top and abandoned. Charged off at $31,200 in March of that year. And the name on it, as personal guarantor, was mine, the diner's line, the one my father spread on the kitchen table, the one with the guarantee. I was sure I must have signed somewhere in the blur. I disputed it. Of course, I disputed it. But here is the trap. And if you've ever been caught in it, you know exactly how it closes. To prove a forgery, you need the original signed document. And the only people with the original were the people who forged it. Keystone had a copy. In a file. My family had the rest. And as far as the credit bureau was concerned, a signature that looked like mine. On a line that said mine. Backed by a father who'd swear it was mine. That was just my debt. Marco had run the line into the ground. The diner had stopped paying, and the $31,200 landed on me. It sat on my report for 6 years and dragged on everything I tried to build, and I could not get it off because I could not prove the one thing I knew in my bones to be true. So, I built around it. I paid cash for everything. I waited it out. And I told myself that someday, somehow, I'd get my hands on the original. I just never imagined how, now. The part I waited 8 years to tell. It was a Wednesday in January. Last winter, a little after 9 in the morning, I had a queue of flagged small business administration files to review. Applications the automated system had kicked to my unit for inconsistencies, debt to income mismatches, unverifiable references, financials that didn't reconcile with the tax transcripts, standard, and tune. I work them in order. I don't pick. The next file in the queue was an expansion loan, $250,000. The applicant business was a restaurant. The business name, loaded at the top of my screen, Petralia's Diner, Merrick, Pennsylvania. My coffee stopped halfway to my mouth. I want to tell you, my hands shook. They didn't. 8 years of training, a steady face had given me one. But I felt my own pulse in my ears, and for a second, I just sat there and looked at the name of the building that had eaten my 20s, sitting in my work queue, flagged for fraud, waiting for me to open it. Here is what I did first, and I want you to hear it, because it is the whole reason I won. I did not open the personnel pages. I did not call anyone. I opened a new email, and at 9:11 a.m. I wrote to my unit director and to compliance. And I disclosed the conflict of interest in plain language. Applicant business is owned by my immediate family. I have a personal history with the principals, including a financial dispute. I am flagging this now. Before review and requesting guidance on recusal, I time-stamped my own integrity before I let myself feel a thing, because Dolores was right. A ledger doesn't lie for anybody, and neither would I. Not even to win. Compliance called me within the hour, and what they told me changed the shape of everything, because I disclosed it, and because I happened to possess original, contemporaneous, primary source records of that business's actual operations. The green ledger, my handwriting, dated. For every one of those 7 years, they did not just remove me, They assigned a senior colleague, a man named Theo Park, to make the actual credit decision. So my hands were clean of it, and they retained me, in writing, as a fact, witness and document custodian. My job was not to judge the file. My job was to tell the truth about what I knew. Under the bank's rules, on the record, I have never in my life followed a procedure so carefully, every step documented, every contact logged. I would not give them 1 inch to ever call this personal. I would borrow the system's own rules and let them do the work. Then Theo and I opened the file together, 1 page at a time. And the floor dropped out from under it, slowly, the way I like best. Page 1. The business overview. Marco Petralia, sole owner and operator. So, as if our father had handed it down, and Marco had run it. Single-handed for a decade. Page 2. The management history, and there it was. Every bullet point, every line. Managed daily operations for a multi-station restaurant and catering business. Directed scheduling, payroll, and vendor accounts. Maintained financial records and reconciliation. Grew catering, revenue. Every single one of those things was a thing I did. In booth 6. After midnight. For free. Why? He had taken my work history and stapled his name to the top of it, the same way our father always had. Except now, it was on a federal loan application. And that is not a family habit anymore. That is a felony. Page 3. The financials. Annual revenue. Listed at $640,000. Theo whistled low. I didn't have to guess whether that was real, because I'd kept the real numbers for 7 years and watched them for 8. And the diner had never cleared 400 in its life. The statements were inflated by more than half, propped up with catering figures. That didn't exist. And page 7. The supporting credit history. To show the business had a track record of responsible borrowing. The application included, as an exhibit, a prior line of credit in good standing. Keystone Savings, $48,000, with a personal guarantee. Attached, my guarantee, the forged one, the one that had been dragging my credit for 6 years. Marco had reused the very document that had been quietly destroying my life. Used it as a credential, a gold star. Proof the family paid its debts. He didn't even know what he was handing me. He'd handed me the original. I want you to remember the gray deposit bag now. Remember just a formality. Remember the green ledger I almost left behind. Every single thing they ever made me carry, they had just placed, neatly, into evidence. They'd spent 10 years calling me the one who keeps the books. They forgot what that means. It means I keep the receipts. Maybe you've been there too, holding the one piece of paper that finally proves what you always knew and could never say. If you have, you know the silence I sat in for a minute, looking at that screen. It isn't triumph. It is quieter than that. It is the feeling of a column, at long last, about to balance. Now, I had to do it right. Under the rules, an application this size with these flags triggers a verification process. References called employment confirmed, recorded where the law allows. Pennsylvania allows a recorded call with one party's consent. The listed reference on Marco's file for the years of operations history was Sal Petralia, owner of record, my father. Compliance authorized me, in writing, to conduct the verification call, with Theo monitoring on the line as a second party, because I was the only person on Earth who knew the exact questions that would turn a friendly reference call into a confession. And because doing it any other way would have left a gap a lawyer could drive a truck through. Documented. Supervised. Lawful. I read the authorization twice, and I picked up my desk line. I dialed the diner. It connected on the third. Tone. Petralia's. This is Sal, my father's voice. I had not heard it in 8 years. It landed somewhere. I thought I'd sealed off. I kept my own voice exactly where I'd trained it. Cool, even. Professional. Good morning. This is the loan verification department at Allegheny Commercial Bank. I am calling to verify some employment and operations. History in connection with an application. Do you have a moment? Sure. Sure, he said. Warm. Helpful, the man the whole town trusted. He did not recognize my voice. 8 years and 1,000 careful breaths had buried it that deep. Thank you. I am verifying for the applicant. Marco Petralia. Can you confirm that Marco Petralia served as the sole operations manager of Petralia's Diner? From 2009 through 2016. Yep. That is right. Marco ran the whole operation, top to bottom. And during that period, did anyone else perform the operations management, the bookkeeping, the scheduling, the financial records for the business? A pause. Just a small one. No. He said, that was all Marco. He is a natural at it. There it was. The lie that mattered. Recorded, lawful, witnessed, because I existed. I had been there for every hour of it, and I had the tax records that listed me as a dependent and not an employee. And the vendor emails addressed to Nora at Petralia's, and a green ledger in my own hand, dated for every one of those years, and the Keystone Savings line of credit, listed as a credit reference. I said, can you confirm who personally guaranteed that line? That'd be my daughter. He said, easy as anything. Nor. Wah, she backed it. Good credit. Steady girl. Thank you. I said, that is everything I need. I hung up. I saved the recording. And in the file, in flat, factual language, I wrote one line. Reference confirmed sole operator status and guarantee execution. Statements inconsistent with primary source records in custodian's possession. Recommend full review. Stay with me. This is where the world starts contracting around them. One document at a time, and I never once raised my voice. I turned the green ledger and the rest of it over to the unit. Every page. The tax transcripts that proved I'd been carried as a dependent for the years. Marco claimed to have run the place alone. The vendor correspondence, with my name on it. The freezer compressor receipt that put me 40 miles from the Keystone closing on the afternoon that guarantee was signed. And the bank did what banks do. When fraud is on the table, they brought in their forensic document examiner. She took the forged Keystone guarantee and a folder of my known verified signatures, my license, my own loan documents, 8 years of the real thing. And she did the work I am not licensed to do myself. She compared the letter forms, the pen pressure, the rhythm, and she put her finding in writing. The signature on the Keystone Savings personal guarantee was not written by the same hand that produced the known exemplars of Nora Petralia. In her professional opinion, it was a simulation, a forgery. 8 years. Home. 8 years that debt had sat on me like a stone, and I could never lift it because I never had the original. And my brother had mailed me the original himself. As a brag, here is what happened next, and I am going to give it to you plainly. Because the catharsis isn't in screaming, it is in the verdict landing, line by line. In language you could read off a statement. The loan was denied, $250,000 gone, on the grounds of material misrepresentation and fraudulent financial statements. Marco's expansion, the next big picture, the one that was finally going to be real, died on a Wednesday in a queue he never knew I sat in front of. The bank filed a suspicious activity report. That is the formal referral that goes up the chain to the federal authorities. When an institution finds what we found: application fraud, forged instruments, a false guarantee submitted to a federally backed lender. That is not a family argument. That is a file with a number on it now, sitting where the law can see it. And the third thing, the one that was mine, armed with the examiner's written finding and the bank's documentation, I opened a formal fraud claim with Keystone Savings on that old guarantee, with a professional forgery determination in hand. The thing I'd never been able to get on my own. Keystone's fraud unit voided the guarantee. The $31,200 charge-off was removed from my credit report, and the liability was reassigned where it had always belonged, to the actual principals of record on that line. The diner and my father, who'd sworn on a recorded call that it was all real. My credit jumped 90-some points in a single cycle. I watched it update on a Tuesday morning over coffee in my own apartment. And that was the only time in this entire story that I let myself cry. Alone. Not for them. For the 26-year-old who carried that stone for 6 years, thinking it was hers, and never once knew she'd been robbed. I dried my face, and I went to work. Because a ledger never balanced itself. There was one loop left, and now I finally had the standing. To close it, a forgery finding on the Keystone guarantee meant a pattern, and a pattern meant I could go back and ask the question I'd been too ashamed to ask for 8 years. Why? Brenner and Associates never made me an offer. I called the firm. Priya Anand answered. She is a name partner. There now, she remembered me instantly. Said she'd thought about me for years. The strong candidate who'd taken the interview, and then vanished. I asked her, plainly, what my file said. She went quiet. Then she pulled it while I held the line. It says you declined. She told me, there is a letter, and a note that you called to confirm. I asked her to look at the letter. To really look at it. And I told her what I'd find if she scanned it and sent it to me. Because by then, I already knew. A signature that was a simulation of mine. A phone call my mother made, pretending to be a firm checking on a candidate who'd changed her mind. Priya sent me the letter that afternoon. I laid it next to the Keystone guarantee, and the same forger's hand was all over both of them. The same hesitation in the capital letters. The same careful, wrong rhythm. 8 years late. I finally read the document that had quietly ended the first life I tried to build. Walt Brenner had retired, but Priya wrote me one line I keep framed in my home office. Next to my license, we never passed on you. Nora, we were robbed of you. The same as you were robbed of us. for whatever it is worth 8 years late. You were good enough then. You are plainly exceptional now. I was good enough then. They'd stolen it. I built something better anyway. Now, I told you my family does the worst things calmly. With paperwork. What I hadn't counted on was how loud they'd get. The moment the paperwork stopped going their way, the denial letter went out under the bank's name. Not mine. Marco didn't know I was anywhere near it. For about a week, there was nothing. Then my cousin Renata, the one relative who still talked to both sides, let it slip to Marco that I worked in fraud review at a Pittsburgh bank, and Marco did the math, and the calls started. He got my cell number from Renata. He called 11 times in one evening. I did not answer 10 of them. The 11th, I answered, on speaker, Hunt Fikar, in my director's office, with compliance present and a notepad open. Because by now you understand, I do nothing in the dark. Nora. His voice was shaking with that particular fury of a man who has only ever been protected. What did you do? They denied the loan. They said, fraud. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I let him finish. Then I gave it to him. The way I give a finding, in order. In order. No heat. 1. I disclosed my conflict and recused from the decision the moment I saw the file. I did not deny your loan. The bank denied your loan because your financial statements were false and your guarantee was forged. 2. You listed yourself as sole operator for 7 years of work that I did, unpaid, while you funded food trucks. That history is mine. I have it in writing, dated, in my own hand. 3. The Keystone guarantee you used as a credit reference was a forgery of my signature. There is now a professional examiner's finding that says so, and that debt has been lifted off me and put back on the people who signed it. So whatever you think I did to this family, what I actually did was stop carrying a lie that 3 of you built and called a formality. Silence on the line. Then he switched. The way they always do, from fury to wound. We're family, Nora. You are supposed to protect family. I did, I said, for 7 years. The morning I tried to protect myself, you handed me a deposit bag and told me family doesn't keep score. A pause. What? What? You don't even remember. I said, that is all right. The ledger does. And I ended the call. I made no scene. I pressed the red circle, and I slid the phone across the desk, and my director said, very quietly, that was the most controlled thing I've ever watched a person do. The escalation kept coming for a while. The way it does. My father left a voicemail. This is your father. What you've done is unforgivable. You've destroyed your brother. Call me. With not one syllable of an apology in it. My mother sent an email with the subject line. How could you? Telling me I used to be such a sweet girl, that the children were asking why their aunt hated them, that I should be the bigger person and fix this. I read each one once. I answered, none of them. On the advice of counsel, I sent a single letter back, through my lawyer, to all 3 of them. No further contact, by phone, email, or in person. Any breach would be met with a restraining order, enclosed. a copy of the examiner's forgery finding, and one sentence: Nora Petralia will communicate only through counsel, if at all. 3 weeks of silence followed, and then a small package arrived at my apartment, and it undid me in a way none of the rest had. It was from my grandmother, my Nonna Rosa, my father's mother, 81 years old, who in 8 years had never once taken a side out loud, and who I'd assumed had simply let me disappear, like everyone else. Inside the package were 2 things. The first was a card, in her shaking cursive, that said, "I am too old to fix what they did, and I am sorry I was too scared to try, but I kept these for you. I always knew whose they were." And the second thing, wrapped in a dish towel, the way she wrapped everything precious, 3 more green ledgers. And the old ones. The years before. The one I'd taken with me. My handwriting, page after page. Every honest number I'd ever kept for that family. Dated and initialed in my own hand. She'd taken them out of the diner office the year I left, before anyone thought to throw them out. And she'd kept them in her attic in a hatbox for 8 years. Because, she told me later, on the one phone call I did take, a person's work is a person's work, Nora. Somebody in this family was always going to need to prove who really did it. I just held on to it until you came back to ask. If you've ever been told you were family right up until you needed something, and then found out one quiet person was keeping the receipts for you the whole time. You know there is no word for that feeling. I sat on my floor with 3 green ledgers in my lap. And I let myself feel all of it. I didn't get the family back. I want to be honest with you, because the cheap version of this story ends with a tearful reunion, and the true version doesn't. My parents moved in with Marco. They are, last I heard, still telling Marwick that I betrayed them. We have no contact, and we will not. I made my peace with the apology I am never going to get. But I got Nonna Rosa back for the 2 years she had left, and I drove out to see her every month until the end. And we never once talked about the others. We talked about numbers and her garden and the diner, the way it was before any of it went wrong. And I got one more thread out of the wreckage. The one that surprised me most, Marco's daughter, my niece, Gianna, 12 years old, found me on her own last spring, a message to my work profile. She said she'd looked me up because her math teacher said she had a head for numbers, and somebody at a family dinner had mentioned, like a warning, that her aunt was some kind of money detective in Pittsburgh. She wanted to know if that was a real job. I told her it was the realest job I knew. I told her about reconciliation, about how the numbers always tell the truth about who did the work, even when the people won't. I didn't say a word against her father. I just answer when she writes, and I always will. That is the thread I kept, not the family that raised me, the one small person in it who looked at me and saw something worth becoming. There is a part of this I do for strangers now, too. I started a small program at the bank, quiet, unglamorous, that helps young people from controlling families learn to read their own financial paperwork before they sign it. Before someone calls it just a formality. If this story put a name to something you've been carrying, share it with the one person in your life who needs to hear it. Somebody out there is standing in their own kitchen right now with a deposit bag at their feet, deciding whether to step over it. Let them know about the back door. Let me close where I started, with the book. For 7 years, the green ledger was the symbol of everything they trapped me into. The duty, the unpaid hours. The second set of books I kept after midnight for a business that took my name off everything I built. I used to look at it and see a cage made of my own neat handwriting. I don't see that anymore. Because of an 81-year-old woman with a hat box. That ledger turned out to be the one thing in that whole house that never lied for them. It told the truth about who did the work, dated and signed. And it waited 8 years to set me free. My father always said, family doesn't keep score. He was wrong. Somebody was always keeping score. It was me. It was always me. In booth 6, after the lights went down. In a green book they never bothered to read. I keep a different book. Now, my own. Clean credit, a license with my name on it, a savings account I built $1 honest at a time. A niece I answer for. A grandmother I got to say goodbye to, and a life that nobody handed me, and nobody can take. And on the back page under a number I once wrote in pencil. $145,145, the wages they owed me at the floor of the law. I added one word last winter. The day that charge-off finally came off my name, not free. Free was just the door I walked out of. I wrote paid. Every stolen year, every forged line, every hour in booth 6, settled in full. On my terms. By the book. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me. If you've walked out your own kitchen door, or you are standing at one right now with your hand on the handle, deciding, subscribe, and stay close. There are more of these stories. Real people and real exits. And somebody always needs to hear that the most honest thing in the building is usually the thing that finally gets you out. Some doors, you are shoved through. Some doors, you choose. And some doors, like a steel kitchen door behind a diner on Mill Street, lead exactly where you were always supposed to go. Thanks for listening.